This happened to me when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and to this day it's one of the most disturbing and confusing encounters that I've ever had. It was a very hot afternoon during summer vacation, and I decided to have a lemonade stand down the street from my house. My friend and I rode our bikes 2 blocks away and set up shop. A few hours passed and she decided that she had to go home for dinner. It was starting to get a little dark out, and I was left to pack up the little table and the lemonade pitchers by myself. And then a man walked up to me. He was about 30-something years old and had a really strange expression on his face, like he was smiling and wide-eyed. He walked up very close to me, and I'll never forget what he said.
"What would happen if you had no skin?"
I was taken aback and just responded, I'm not sure." And he said,
"What would happen if you had no heart?"
And then,
"What would happen if you had no toes? What would happen if you had no eyes?"
he kept getting closer and closer to me and still had something very, very off about his facial expression. I was naive and young, and although I didn't realize how creepy this really was, I felt really uncomfortable and started grabbing all of my stuff. But because I had so many things, I couldn't ride my bike home, and I had to wheel it next to me. When I started walking away towards my house, the man started following behind me, still not saying anything except for asking me what would happen if I didn't have certain body parts. When I sped up, he did too. And then, eventually, he trailed off, and every time I looked back, he was just standing on the corner, looking at me. I never told my parents, and I never saw him again. I was more uncomfortable and confused than I was scared, if I'm being honest. But now looking back on it, I wonder, was he just mentally handicapped, a harmless man? Or was he some kind of dangerous, disturbed man? I'm still not sure to this day. This happened when I was at university about 10 years ago. I hadn't experienced anything like it before, and I haven't experienced anything like it since. I like to tell myself that it was an elaborate prank, given the circumstances, but I don't know who did it or why. I lived on the north side of town, and the university library was in the south. The streets are numbered north to south, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, etc., but a train track with a small woody area cuts through between 13th and 14th Street, and only a few roads actually cross it or go under it. I was studying late at the library, until maybe 2 a.m, and was walking home on Friday the 13th. To get to my apartment, I have to walk north a ways, then jig down 13th to get to a road that passes under the railway. As I turn onto 13th, the streetlight above me goes out. This happens a lot, so I don't think much of it. Until the next streetlight goes out while I'm under it too. And then the next, and the next. As I reach about the middle of the block, all of the streetlights in front of me just go out too. But the first one turns back on. Drawn by the light, I turn around and look, and standing directly under the light is a figure wearing a white hoodie and dark pants. It's looking down at the ground, so I can't see any face, and it was definitely not moving. Behind me, the streetlight on the other end of the block, it turns on, and I turn around to glance at the light, and it's standing there, about 500 yards from the first streetlight. White hoodie, dark pants, looking down. I double take back to the first light and nobody's there. Now I'm pretty freaked out, and the figure in front of me slowly looks up. The hood, it looks empty. I try to sound manly and say, hello? But I'm a little squeaky. The figure turns and walks across the street into the woody area by the tracks. I can see the white of the hoodie for a little while, and then it's gone. All of the streetlights on the block, about 10, turned back on all at once too. I ran home that night. As a background, I grew up in the suburbs of Sacramento, California, in an area that was very middle class and a place where it always felt safe. As a kid, I would walk home from school with the neighbors, and we would play hide and seek and basketball on the streets, etc. And we never had any strange encounters. I am currently a 30-year-old male, and it's weird to think about this story. Anyways, during the weekends when I was a teenager, I would ride my bike for hours at a time and ride around a 10-block radius from where my house was. In Sacramento, we typically had good weather in spring, and a lot of the days were mild temperatures with a decent amount of clear skies and sunlight. I'm actually a pretty introverted individual, and also pretty naive to things around me. I vividly remember one time when I was 13 years old and riding my bike in the neighborhood. I had a speedometer on my bike, and I always traveled around 12 to 16 miles per hour in the right-hand side bike lane of the street. While I was cruising on my bike, a windowless white van pulled up next to me on my left and matched my speed. I remember glancing over and thinking nothing of this, since it is a neighborhood street and it would be weird if a van blazed by me at 35 miles per hour. Within a few seconds of the van matching my speed, the right side door slid open. There were two guys in the back and one guy driving. I look over and the van got uncomfortably close to me, and one of the guys said quite loudly, "Get in the van." I didn't reply, but started pedaling faster and reached about 18 miles per hour, which I know isn't very fast compared to a van, but it seemed like the right thing to do at the time. The van accelerated to match my speed, and I looked over at them. The van was weird on the inside. I remember seeing no seats in the back. The two guys were obviously not seatbelted in, and I remember seeing the metal flooring of the van and some rope. The guy beckoned, in more of an insisting tone, to get inside the van. He reached out since I was within arm's distance. At this time, we were travelling straight, but literally, just as he reached out, the road that we were on intersected with another street that I instinctively turned a hard right onto. They were forced to keep going straight, otherwise they would have flipped the van to follow me. I knew the area well and started weaving in between the residential streets that consisted of lots of curved roads that looped and resembled a maze. In hindsight, it was scary to be in that area because they could have easily found me, as I couldn't have seen them coming up on me because of the curved roads and all. But luckily, they didn't make another pass. Nowadays, I look back and wonder what they had intended to do. Were they just goofing around? Were the ropes just for belaying and rock climbing or something? Or did they actually have a malicious intent? Did they ever do anything to anyone else who couldn't get away? These questions still linger with me, and I went home and never told anyone about it. To this day, only 2 people know about this. And obviously, now all of you guys. So, My friend Molly's grandparents just died and they left their house to her. The house has been in their family for 3 generations, so we've known that it was haunted for quite some time. It was built in the late 1930s, but has been owned by their family since the 70s. According to her grandparents, weird stuff has happened since they first moved in. Now, about the weird stuff, we've each experienced the exact same things, but at different times, as it usually only happens when you're by yourself in the house. Anytime you walk up the hallway, alone that is, you'll feel and hear what I can only describe as someone sprinting up behind you and jumping on your back. It's quite disturbing as you can hear the footsteps, heavy breathing and everything else that would normally come with someone running up behind you. It happens in the blink of an eye, and by the time that you turn around, there's nothing there. Just silence and you questioning your own sanity. It happened to me the first time that I stayed there. I had absolutely no knowledge about the house's history at this point. I went to the backyard where everyone else was, and the first thing she said to me was, and by the way, I probably should warn you that this house is haunted." I said, "You know, it's funny you should say that because I swear that someone just ran up behind me." And before I could finish the sentence, everyone else in unison said, "In the hallway." Also, at night, for the entire night, you can hear someone pacing up and down this same hallway. I mean, it seriously goes on for the entire night. But if you look or walk into the hallway, it will pause just long enough for you to go back to whatever you were doing. And then it will start back up again. There is one room in the house, and yes, right by the hallway, that if you sleep there, it'll wake you up in the morning by knocking on the door. The knock is always exactly the same. Soft, 3 knocks with an equal and semi-long pause between each one. If you don't respond, you'll get the same knock every couple of minutes until you finally do respond. The first time it happened to me, Molly and I were both asleep. I was the only one who woke up to the knock, and at first, I thought it was her dad. But the knock was so strange, and it wouldn't be like her dad not to yell some funny thing through the door to wake us up. After the 3rd or 4th eerie knock, I looked out the window to see that all the cars were gone, and we were the only ones home there. At this point, I freaked out and woke Molly up. She was obviously aggravated and got up to open the door and show me that nothing was there. As soon as she stood up, though, the door opened up about halfway, completely by itself. And the weird thing is, it's not a normal hinged door. The house has those sliding doors that aren't particularly easy to open. They certainly couldn't be opened by the wind or anything. And yet, it happens all the time. All the doors throughout the whole house. Things will go missing or fall off of shelves. Molly said that she's heard people talking before and once woke up to someone screaming her name in the hallway. There's also a mirror that's always cracked, and her grandparents said that they had to replace it many times, but each time they did, they would wake up the next day to the same result. Cracked all the way down the middle again. So, the reason why I'm sharing all of this is that I'd like to ask you guys if you've ever had any experience with something like this before. Does anyone have any idea as to what this could be, or if there's anything to make it stop? Any advice would be really appreciated. In case you're wondering what we look like, I'm a 17-year-old, 100-pound red-headed chick who's the furthest thing from intimidating that you'll ever see. My boyfriend Ian is 22, a super skinny white dude with shaggy hair and a bunch of tattoos. And he's got to be the second least intimidating person that you'll ever see. Ian and we have a picnic every Thursday evening. The location always varies, but we usually end up at our favorite spot, which we refer to as the Heaven Spot. Now, the reason it's called the Heaven Spot is because we live in the dirtiest dregs of the most ghetto part of town. But amidst the abandoned buildings and blankets of graffiti lies a historical house surrounded by towering weeping willows and shrouded with vines. Across from the mansion is a beautifully secluded field with gardens and the greenest grass that you'd ever see. It even has solar garden lights so that the whole place is dimly lit at night. Because of the giant trees and the fact that most of the street is abandoned, there's never anybody there, and it quickly became our favorite place to go to. So, we're having our picnic and we're smoking a blunt in a tree when we notice a passerby, which was rare. It piques our curiosity, but we don't think much about it and go back to minding our own business and getting high and pretending like nothing bad could ever happen to us because, we're teenagers and all. This stranger appears to be in his late 20s though. Kind of short, but really burly. He's wearing a grey hoodie and some baggy pants, and he has a face tat. I don't know how relevant that is, but maybe it will help you paint a picture of him in your head. We see him a few more times as he nervously paces up and down the street. But once again, we're in the ghetto. I mean, our neighbours sell meth. A homeless guy lived with us for 6 months. So we just assume that he's a tweaker or drug dealer, or maybe just a lost soul, and we go back to our picnic without giving it a second thought. The sun begins to set and we decide to head back home before it gets too dark. Our house is about 2 blocks away and conveniently difficult to find. There's this apartment complex, and hidden behind that, our apartment complex, is another tiny quadruplex, and that's where we live. So, we're making our way up the quickly darkening street when Ian turns to me and whispers, "Hey, I'm pretty sure that guy's following us." I turn around to see the guy who's been lurking a good distance behind us, maybe 4 or 5 intersections back now. Me, being the oblivious person that I am, I chalk it up to the weed just making Ian paranoid and kind of brush off his accusation and continue on with whatever dumb thing that I'm babbling on about. A few seconds go by and he interrupts me again, this time with a deeper tone in his voice. "No, I'm telling you, he's following us." This startles me. For one, Ian isn't the type to ever be afraid of anything. And for two, I've never heard this tone of voice from him before. "Well, how do you know that he's not just walking in the same direction as us?" Ian tells me. "Well, turn around and look at him. Notice where he is, and then turn back around and act as though nothing's wrong, okay?" I turn back to look at him, and he is a bit closer now, but nothing too out of the ordinary. A couple of seconds go by, maybe 10, and Ian says, "Okay, now look again." This time, I turn back to see that the man, he's significantly closer. Every time we turn around, he starts running towards us, but when we turn back to look at him, he pretends to be casually walking again. At this point, he's only about 20 feet away from us, and we're stuck in that fight or flight moment where we only have a few seconds to determine the next step. We cross the street as a final requisite, and the man crosses too. What do we do? Run. And then he bolts away, leaving me in the dust. Now, let me tell you something about Ian. He was a track star in high school, and in the 3 seconds it takes me to comprehend what's happening, he's already halfway up the street and around the damn corner. It's like that scene from every zombie movie where some asshole trips his friend and leaves him to be eaten alive while he escapes through a conveniently placed door or something. The thing about me is, I'm a terrible runner. It's one of my biggest weaknesses, in fact. I take off running and at some point glance back to just see if the guy was chasing me, which, mind you, he is. And he's right on my damn tail. The worst part about all of this is that I don't have a wallet or anything of value, so even if his intention is just to rob me, there's no way that this is going to end well. There's no one around. Absolutely no one. I make it around the corner towards the apartment complex, and am luckily much more familiar with the area than this guy is. I plummet into the apartment gates and zigzag through some of the tiny buildings, run through a clearing and past the first quadruplex, which is identical to mine, circle around and then haul ass to my front door. I've been running so fast that by now, I have no idea if this guy is still behind me, and how close behind me. In a moment of sheer panic, I fumble for the keys and somehow manage to get them in the doorknob, even though my hands are shaking like Elvis Presley. I fling the door open and slam it behind me and lock it as fast as I can. And then I wait in terror. Did I lose him? Did he see where I went? Is he going to come back later? What does he want? Is he going to bust out one of my many windows and murder me or something? I simply don't know. I haven't the slightest idea what this guy's intentions are, but there are windows all around, and even the door is basically just one big window. Luckily, all the blinds are down, but you can still see shadows, and there's a broken blind on the door where anyone can peek in or out. I sit on the ground beneath the door in hopes that I've lost the guy, in hopes that he didn't see where I went. A few moments pass, but I tell you, it feels like an eternity. Ian, mind you, is nowhere to be found. I don't have any weapons, and I'm paralyzed with fear that he'll see me through the blinds if I stand up or try to make it to my phone. And then it happens. A shadowy figure peers through the broken blind. I can only see his muffled silhouette, but I know that he's looking inside. I'm ducked down, hopefully out of sight, at the bottom of the door and completely frozen. He stands there for at least a minute, and eventually just leaves. To this day, I don't know if he saw me enter my house, or if I got lucky enough with the whole zigzag routine to make it inside just in time for him to not be sure which door I went into. I don't know what he wanted, or why he was chasing us. I also don't know why he didn't just attack us in the field when there was no one around and we were in such a secluded location. Anyway, the moral of this story is, fuck Ian. This story begins somewhere around my junior year of high school. I was 15 years old, and in that phase of my life where I didn't listen to anyone, yet at the same time was completely impressionable. At the beginning of the year, I was sitting in my 6th period chem class, probably zoned out, looking at my phone under the clunky grey lab table, when I heard 2 people laughing to my right. The way the classroom was set up was a long rectangle, so essentially, the teacher wouldn't really be able to hear what was going on in the back. The people laughing were a guy and a girl, Eric and Callie. They were somewhat popular, not the top of the food chain by many means, but everybody knew them. My younger sister knew Eric, and they had a tennis match a month or 2 earlier. Eric was... he was really funny, and This is a crucial element to this story, in fact. He was definitely the class clown. He was tall, good-looking, and extremely charismatic. I wasn't attracted to him personally, but I could see why everyone else was. I think it was at this point in time where I made one of the most regrettable decisions of my life. I decided that I wanted to be friends with Eric. Eric was in my 2nd, 5th, and 6th periods. The next morning, I poked him in the back in Spanish class. "Hey," I said, "I heard my sister kicked your ass in tennis." He turned around with a goofy smile, his friends all looking at me. "Who's your sister?" His voice had a specific cadence to it. "Karen," I replied. I don't remember the rest of this encounter, but I'm pretty sure that he denied losing the tennis match. I think the conversation ended shortly thereafter, and my day continued until I saw him in math class. Algebra 2 was one of those classes where the teacher would lecture for a while, give us homework, and then let us have the rest of the period to work on it so we wouldn't have to do it when we got home. I was looking at my paper, probably confused, when I hear a familiar voice. "Hey, girl." I looked down and saw Eric, crouched next to my desk on the floor. "What's up?" He started asking me about tennis, and once I said that I played, a huge smile spread across his face. I think this is when he latched onto me. He asked for my phone number, and I gave it to him. That day, in our next period, he introduced me to Callie. She was older and really intimidating. I had never, ever met anyone like her, and I was beginning to get excited at the prospect of these new interesting friends. That night, he kept texting me non-stop. He would ask me questions and then would reply with laughing to everything I said. I thought it was weird, but that it was probably just his humor. After this day, he didn't leave my side. We spent most of the school day together, and then we would be in constant contact after school. This was 2011, so we were mostly on Facebook or doing group phone calls with Callie and 2 other friends of mine that I had brought into the group, Sasha and Natalie. There were a lot of red flags. Eric wanted me to hold hands with him at school and told everyone that he had taken my virginity. For some reason, this wasn't something that I got too mad about. I just thought it was weird. He would say, "Your virginity belongs to me." Again, I just assumed that it was a poor joke. I always assumed Eric wasn't attracted to girls because he said he wasn't. Although he would have sex with them and then tell everyone, making fun of them even. He would walk down the hallway after 5th period and he would stop for a group of freshman girls waiting for him to give them each a peck on the lips. One time, we were walking to the bus and there was a girl about 10 feet in front of us. She was cheating on her boyfriend, which I whispered to him, pointing her out. Yes, it was childish, but keep in mind, this was high school and I was 15. He proceeds to run towards her, though, and stops her, only to point at me and tell her what I said. She came over and yelled at me, and he watched, laughing. A few months into the friendship, and I began sneaking out with Eric, bringing him alcohol from my dad's liquor cabinet. Eric was a heavy drinker, especially considering our age. This all came to a head when he asked Callie and I to come over one night. His dad was in prison and His mum was apparently in rehab, so he lived with his grandparents. We pulled up outside of his house and his car wasn't there. We waited for a while and finally he sped into the neighborhood and stumbled out of the driver's seat, wasted. We followed him inside. His grandparents weren't home. I don't know what I said, but the next thing I know, he grabs a knife off the kitchen counter and charges at me. I took off running and made it into Callie's car, slamming the door shut and locking it. He just stares at me through the window before bursting out in laughter. My heart was racing and my blood ran cold, and Callie got into the car and we just left. I don't know why I stuck around. It was like an abusive relationship. He told me that he was the only guy who would ever find me attractive, but somehow it would turn into a joke and would let it go. I believe the breaking point was when I heard about the baby squirrel. He had found a live baby squirrel after school and brought it home. His grandparents said they didn't want it in the house, so he walked outside and tossed it into the retention pond before walking back. I wasn't there for that, but it disgusted me. In algebra, a few days later, he knocked my pen off my desk and called me a bitch. "Eric, I don't want to be friends with you anymore, okay?" I told him firmly. "Don't talk to me." His head snapped back and he moved to the desk in front of mine. "You won't be able to ignore me." He laughed. "I know where to find you. I'm going to college next year, okay?" I reminded him. "You'll never be able to get away from me." "Are you threatening me?" "Yes." I know that this sounds like a cheesy horror movie or something, but that was our exchange. The next week was endless phone calls and him trying to get me to talk to him at school. At first it was jovial when he thought I wasn't going to change my mind. And then he came up to me in math class and opened his backpack. And inside were several large kitchen knives. You know, in case there's a zombie attack or something. Another big smile. I know I should have told the teacher at that point. I really should have. But it wasn't until a few days later when he pushed me too far. He told me that he was going to sexually assault me and then murder me, and was going to make Natalie film it. I went to the dean's office, obviously, and told them everything. I had grown up being told not to snitch, but I couldn't focus in class anymore. I'd been a good kid and I'd never been in trouble, so they believed what I told them. But here's the kicker. They called him into the office and he admitted to everything. Nodded, smiling, confirming all the stories I told them. Dean Thomas sat me down the next day and told me that I needed to call the police. They said that there was clearly something wrong with him and that he just didn't get it. They put a school version of a restraining order on him and he wasn't supposed to talk to me, and during tests he had to be taken to a separate classroom. He would do everything that he could to get around those rules, obviously. He would talk about me right in front of my face, but wasn't technically talking to me. He said, out loud, to the class, "You know, some girl put a restraining order on me because she thinks that I'm dangerous." The teacher laughed and said, "Doesn't she know that you're joking? That's just you being Eric." And the backlash I faced was enormous. All of his groupies shunned me and laughed at me. Even my own friends said that I was overreacting. Everyone, except for Natalie. She was always intuitive. She said that he made her feel uncomfortable and he had started following her from class to class. When his birthday came, he approached me with Callie, and Callie said, "He wants you to wish him a happy birthday, okay?" Eventually, a mutual friend called me and told me that Eric had threatened to take his own life if I wouldn't talk to him again. I went back to the dean's office, and this time every dean, vice principal, and even the principal got involved. My school was pretty big, and there were at least 550 kids in my year. The school year ended, and without the protection of the authorities there, I was fielding more phone calls. And when I blocked his number, he would call me on Callie's phone. He would drive around my neighborhood to see if my car was in the driveway. He even came to my tennis matches, the ones we initially bonded over. I could see his silhouette in the fence, watching me. By senior year, things had finally calmed down. His attention was elsewhere, and I had picked my classes with the dean to ensure that we weren't in any together. He was still watching, though. I would be walking down the hallway with someone that he didn't know, and all of a sudden, he would be walking with us, next to my unassuming friend. "Hey, I'm Eric. Nice to meet you." He told my friends that he decided to wait for me because we were apparently soulmates, and that I'd come around eventually. I graduated high school, and I just moved out of town. I told my new college friends that if something ever happened to me, that he was the one who did it for sure. And that's where it all kind of ends. There's no conclusion, really, except that he always knows when I come into town somehow. I don't know how, because I haven't blocked on everything. I suspect that he still checks my house, though. He's been arrested since then, too, on drug charges and a few DUIs. I'm looking at his mugshots as I share this to remember those dead eyes. And sometimes I think that maybe I just overreacted. Maybe it was all just a joke. But those dead eyes, I tell ya, there's something to them. I'll give a little background about myself for my story. I'm a young gay male living in a medium-sized city. The dating scene here is rather limited, and most gay people use apps or websites for meeting others for encounters or dates. I frequent websites and apps daily just to see if there's anyone new out there that I haven't already spoken to, but I rarely actually meet anyone from online. The fear of STIs or being robbed has always been in the back of my mind, so I generally just browse without ever actually meeting guys. About 6 months ago, though, while browsing Craigslist, I found an ad that seemed to be somewhat what I was looking for. The ad was by a man a little older than myself who seemed to want the same things that I wanted. He wanted to meet up with a guy my age and get to know one another over drinks. Maybe a little cuddle session or something, but whatever else may follow, and not just a quickie kind of thing. After responding to this ad, the guy and I talked for about a month through texting without ever making plans of meeting. I finally got the confidence and asked if he wanted to meet. He agreed, and we decided that I'd drive to his place, which was about 10 miles from me and out of city limits. The day that we decided to meet, it was getting late, about 6 p.m. The sun was still somewhat out, but it was getting darker. I got in my car and drove out to the area where he lived. The guy texted me and said that he'd be walking on the side of the road because he was coming back from visiting a friend, and just asked that I pick him up and go back to his place. He had told me before that he had 2 kids that lived with him, but the kid's mother wasn't in the picture. He said that his kids were at a friend's house and would be back later, so we'd have the place to ourselves. While making my way to the guy's house, I saw him walking on the side of the road. Except, he was holding a large speaker and covered in a hoodie, which seemed strange to me because it wasn't cold at all where we live. The road we were on was very much outside the city lines, on a dirt road with some random trailers set up over an acre or so. I stopped the car and said something friendly like, "Hey stranger, need a ride?" He didn't smile though. He just opened the door and got into my car without saying a word. I thought that this was strange because we had literally spent a month having friendly chats, and I just figured that he'd act happy to see me, or at least not so awkward about it. After picking him up and making my way to his house, he then tells me to turn around and go back to the main road. He wanted to get a blunt and some alcohol so that we could chill together. So, not thinking anything strange at this point, I agree and head back the other way. While on this long dirt road with no streetlights, he mentions that his power is out at his house and asks if that's okay with me. I was slightly thrown off by this, but I said, sure, as long as you have candles, I suppose, or some sort of light source." He didn't say anything, just kept looking straight ahead like I never said anything. I then thought, but what about your kids? How are children living in your house with no power? So I asked him, and this is where things started to get very strange. He replied, "Oh, they're staying with their mum for a while." But he just told me a few days ago that his kids lived with him and with no mother. Questions obviously began to run through my mind, but I didn't feel like I was in trouble just yet. We arrived at the store and he got out with his face and head covered like he was hiding from somebody. This seemed strange to me. Then he got back into the car after making his purchases. While travelling back to his place, which was about a 15-minute drive, he then told me, "You know, I had to sling crack to get money for this so that we could hang out tonight." I was really surprised and shocked when he just randomly told me this. The situation was getting sketchy, so I asked if he had condoms, just in case we decided to need them. He said no, so I dropped him off at another store nearby before starting out our journey down the long dirt road. After inconsistent and strange behaviours coming from this guy, I was just really wanting to get out of this situation as fast as I could at this point. I dropped him off at a local grocery store to pick up some condoms, thinking that this could be my out. I could just drive away and block his number and be done with the situation. After he walked into the store, I was trying to figure out what to do at this point. I wanted to just drive away, but I didn't want to just leave somebody stranded too. I finally got the nerve to leave, but his huge speaker was sitting in my floorboard. I wanted nothing connecting me with this person, and feared that he might possibly say I stole the speaker or something, so I got out of my car, ran to the passenger side, opened the door and started dragging the speaker from my car, and heard, "Hey, what are you doing?" Obviously, it was him. He was right behind me. Fear ran through my body like I had been caught stealing something or lying about a bad grade to my parents. So I told him, I was just going to move this to the back seat so that you'd have more room in the car." It was a quick save, and he seemed to have bought my horrible explanation. But now, he's here, in my car again, and my only out is gone. We're driving down this old dark dirt road, and all that's going through my mind is, how the hell do I get out of this alive? I'm trying to catch him in another lie to see if this is actually happening or just my imagination, but I can't seem to get any information out of him at all. He just sits beside me, looking straight ahead, fidgeting with something in his pockets. It all seemed as though he has a mission to complete, and I'm just here to bring him to it. After driving about 15 minutes down this dirt road, I noticed that there are no longer trailers. The road is pitch black, only lit up by my headlights. I then ask him if his place is coming up, because the navigation said that it should be right here. He tells me, "Oh, the address that I gave you is an old business. My address doesn't show up on Google Maps for some reason." That was a red alert. I started panicking, just knowing that I was about to be robbed or killed in a few moments. I slowed the car down and just thought of anything that could get me out at this point. I told him that my best friend was waiting for me to get back to have a few drinks with her. I said that I didn't realize that we'd be driving so much and that it'd take this long. I'm not sure if he bought this excuse or not, but I told him that I texted my friend the address that he gave me so that she'd know how long I would be out, and when to expect me back for our planned night out. He seemed to trust my explanation, but was very irritated. He said to me, "Well, can't we just have a little fun in the car real quick right here? Nobody lives out here, so nobody will even see us." "No, I'm really sorry, but my friend, she's going to be pissed. She's already called me when you were in the store. I told her that I'd only be about 30 minutes and be back in time for drinks." I was ready to abandon my car at this point if he pulled out a knife or anything other than a gun. But luckily, he just kind of huffed, got out of my car, slammed the door and started to put his head into the window to tell me something. I quickly hit the gas and turned the wheel, leaving nothing but a smoke cloud behind me. I couldn't see him in my rearview mirror due to the darkness of the night, but I imagine that he might have been flipping me off or coughing from the dust plume made by my tires. After pulling myself together and realizing that I might have been the next Oprah story, I called my friend, who wasn't actually waiting for me, my mum, my sister, and everyone that I loved, and told them a slimmed version of the story that took place that night. I teared up a little thinking that I could have almost died, but I overcame that pretty quickly. When I got home that night, I decided to pull the address up that he gave me. I noticed that about 2 miles down the road, there was one house sitting alone with no neighbours. The road was a dead end. I then used Google Street View and saw that the house was completely abandoned, with no doors and dirty walls everywhere. I googled the actual address of that house and found that it was posted for sale about 5 years ago, and was still on the market. I'm guessing that nobody wants to purchase a possible crack house. My friends told me later that they had imagined that he wanted to get me to the house and do whatever he wanted to do. Since there is no traffic that far down the road, I'm sure it would have taken quite a while to find a body that went missing. After all of this, I have vowed to never meet anyone from Craigslist ever again. Unless it's in a police parking lot or something. I don't know. I did vow to just never leave my house, but school and work have made that impossible. All in all, I'm okay with what happened, but it really brought to light to me what could happen when you least suspect it. To start, I'm a teenage female, and I had my own apartment for the first time, having recently moved to a new city to study. I quickly made friends with a group of fun but somewhat troubled teenagers that spend their days loitering at a local coffee shop. One girl that I met in particular is who this story is about. I instantly felt a strong sense of caring about her because she was sweet and bubbly, and the moment I met her, remains one of my favourite and most clear memories of her. This girl tells me of a man named Mike who is like a father to her. But they were her words. He wants to adopt her, apparently. Let's note, too, that this girl doesn't have an ideal family by any means. Her real father is in jail, and she has a very low self-esteem, as he doesn't give her the care that she deserves, really. I soon met him, and right away, I thought that he was great. I was really naive, though. He was a scary-looking biker, in his 50s, and had some awesome tattoos, told stories of his great experiences and travels, and seemed quite educated. I thought that I was so mature, and didn't think that it was odd that we quickly became good friends, as the girl previously mentioned felt safe with him, and we both cared for her. We would drive around, talk about everything. I went to him crying, and he made me feel better within a few hours when the boy I was dating cheated on me and then dumped me. I felt powerful having a friend like him. His favourite subject was the girl that I mentioned, though. He had met her a couple of years prior, by chance, at this coffee shop. She looked exactly like his oldest daughter had at her age. He told me that 2 years prior, his oldest daughter out of 3 had taken her own life, and this girl had filled a void. I felt for him and understood. So, a few months pass and the girl is staying with him. She is soon to be the legal adoption age when she can choose to be adopted by him, and he's getting more and more excited. Alongside her, I'm the person who's closest to him. We spend time talking on the phone, visiting. I slept at his house even. I hung out with the girl and am teaching her how to drive now. Mike was like a father to me in this new town. He watched out for me, told me that I was important to him like the girl is. He would do anything for me. Some of the things he does for me includes letting me leave a project car in his yard, buying parts for it and helping me work on it, and aggressively confronting a boy who took advantage of me while I was intoxicated. Sorry for the huge setup, but it needs to be understood that I trusted and looked up to Mike with everything I had. 6 months after meeting him, this girl turns age to be adopted. I'm now staying in a nearby town, not seeing them as much, but still visiting on weekends. I get a call and he's thrilled to tell me that she's asked to be adopted by him and he wants to have a big party. I'm excited and I congratulate him. The last time I saw this girl was a few days before this, and just as our first meeting is vivid in my memory, so was our last goodbye. A few days later, I hear that she's been reported missing, and Mike is gone, ignoring my texts and eventually deleting his social media. Everyone is in a panic. This girl is adored by everyone, and is as innocent as they come. And this is the start of 2 months of major anxiety and guilt and hurt that Mike had left me. I thought that he was there for me. For some reason, I still don't think that he would do anything to hurt me. He loved her and protected her. Until, a couple of weeks later on Facebook, I see a comment on one of the articles. The police are now searching for Mike, wanting to question him, although he's not a suspect. A girl had commented, "I'm Mike's daughter. Can someone please get me in touch with the family immediately? He's dangerous. I don't believe that she's safe if she's with him." After reading that, I was like, what the fuck? I message her right away, give her the girl's grandmother's number and ask her what she means by "he's dangerous." As we talk, I learn about a few things. He never had 3 daughters, only 2. This girl that I'm talking to is the oldest. When she was a child, he sexually assaulted her, and the girl who I care about so much is apparently the spitting image of his real daughter when she was a teenager. They had apparently had a falling out 2 years prior, and I also learned that the girl certainly had not wanted to be adopted. She had thought that this was too much. However, she was being groomed and enjoyed the gifts. Someone who would give her whatever she wanted. A father figure while hers was not around. I suddenly am thinking now about all of the historical red flags. How could I have been so stupid? He had talked about his time in the Angels. He had put a man in the hospital shortly before I met him after a bar argument. He spent his days hanging around this coffee shop with teenagers. I've had experiences with creepy and dangerous men of all ages, but he totally had fooled me. I think of the times that he told me that he cared about me as he did her. The times that he picked me up drunk from parties, drank at my house. I mean, I even slept at his house. Never once did he do or say anything inappropriate, but he was always overly protective. So, at this point, the police and news reporters are calling me almost daily, asking me what I know about him, asking for all of these details, and I ignore the reporters, fearing that he'll see me on TV. He is eventually found, questioned, and released. Not a suspect. But he disappeared again after this, and I never spoke with him again. 2 months after this lovely girl goes missing, her body is found, and it's deemed a homicide. This was all 1 year ago. There are no leads and no other information released by police. I haven't heard from Mike, although there have been many crazy theories since then and lots of speculation. I don't want to believe that he did it and that he was not arrested or made a suspect for a reason, but everyone thinks that he is very likely the killer. He lied about so many things, and I learned the truth from his real daughter, and I can't possibly fit everything in this story, but there's so much more to it. I often wonder where he is, and I wonder if one day I'll be minding my business and he'll just appear. Something in me still doesn't believe that he could hurt me. Something else wonders, could it have been my body found? But the worst part is the tremendous guilt I feel. I was with him all the time. I spent time with these two. Why didn't I intervene? Why didn't I question these things? I'm so sorry.
G'day mates, it's Busta here, and I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. And you know, that story about the ghost taking things, it reminded me of this time that this guy that I knew managed to steal a calendar, and he got 12 months for it. Oh man, that one was really bad. Oh boy, well... Thanks for listening, guys, and this week I actually have some exciting news to share with you guys. I'm super pumped to be launching my new weekly podcast, Be Scared. It's a Castbox original, so I hope you guys check it out on Castbox, but it's available everywhere that you would normally listen to podcasts today. I'm adding a link in the description below so that you guys can subscribe there. The podcast will be weekly and will feature stories from No Sleep, series stories, and the occasional set of true stories too. It's completely free to subscribe to me there, and you can even download the Castbox app on your phone so you don't miss a thing. And it would be really cool if you guys could review the podcast too, as it should help with rankings and all that stuff. Also, I want to just say a thank you to all of you guys for tuning in every week and being here. I know a lot of you guys have been asking for this podcast for a long time, and without all of you, this podcast would never have happened. So thank you guys for being so supportive and tuning in every week. I'm super excited to be able to share this with you guys finally, and I look forward to seeing you guys all there. As always, it would be great if you guys could like, share, and subscribe. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you mates in the next one.